The Boy Who Carried the Flag Through Fire. The year was 1863, and the fields of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, were about to become a crucible of fire and blood. For 18-year-old Thomas "Tommy" Adkins, a fresh-faced recruit from a small Ohio farm, the promise of glory had long since faded into the harsh reality of war. He clutched the rough wooden staff of the regimental flag, its stars and stripes now tattered and stained, as the relentless roar of artillery shook the very ground beneath his feet. He was just a boy, yet he held the symbol of his nation, a beacon for his comrades, and a target for the enemy. This wasn't the war of parades and grand speeches. This was the brutal, unforgiving reality of a nation tearing itself apart, seen through the eyes of those who bled for it. Tommy had enlisted with a naive fervor, swept up in the patriotic tide that washed over the North. He imagined heroic charges, swift victories, and a triumphant return home. The reality was marching endless miles in ill-fitting boots, enduring hunger and disease, and the constant gnawing fear that tightened his gut with every distant cannon blast. His first taste of combat had been at Antietam, a brutal, bloody affair that had stripped him of his innocence and left him with a haunting emptiness. He'd seen men he'd shared hardtack and jokes with fall, their lives extinguished in an instant. Yet he persevered, driven by a sense of duty, a loyalty to his comrades, and the unwavering belief in the cause he was fighting for. His company, part of the famed Iron Brigade, was a hardened unit, veterans of many skirmishes. They were known for their fierce determination and their distinctive black hats. Tommy, despite his youth, had earned their respect. He was small but wiry, with an unexpected strength when it came to carrying the heavy flag, and an unwavering courage that surprised himself. He remembered the first time he'd been chosen as a flag-bearer. The weight of the responsibility had been almost unbearable, but the proud gaze of his captain, a grizzled, no-nonsense veteran named Captain Miller, had filled him with a fierce resolve. "That flag, son, is more than just cloth and wood. It's the soul of this regiment. Don't let it touch the ground." Now, at Gettysburg, that soul was being tested as never before. The Union line stretched across Culp's Hill, Cemetery Hill, and Little Round Top, forming a formidable defense against the relentless Confederate assaults. Tommy's regiment was positioned near the center, a vital point on the line. The air was thick with the acrid smell of gunpowder and the metallic tang of blood. The wounded lay groaning in makeshift aid stations, their cries a mournful counterpoint to the thunder of the guns. On the second day of battle, July 2nd, the Confederates launched a ferocious attack on the Union left flank. Tommy watched in horror as a wave of rebel soldiers, their battle cries chilling the blood, surged toward them. The roar of musketry became deafening. Men fell on both sides, their lives snuffed out like candles in a gale. Tommy gripped the flagstaff so tightly his knuckles turned white. He saw his comrades loading and firing with grim determination, their faces streaked with sweat and grime. Suddenly, a shell exploded nearby, throwing Tommy to the ground. He landed hard, the flagstaff digging into the earth. For a moment, he was dazed, his ears ringing. He tasted blood in his mouth. Then Captain Miller's voice, sharp and urgent, cut through the haze. "Atkins, get that flag up! They're flanking us!" Tommy scrambled to his feet, his body aching. He looked around. The fighting was desperate. Men were falling all around him. He saw the gleam of bayonets as Confederate soldiers breached a section of the Union line. Panic, cold and raw, threatened to engulf him.
But then he saw the faces of his comrades, their eyes fixed on him, on the flag. He was their rallying point, their symbol of defiance. With a surge of adrenaline, Tommy hoisted the flag high. He pushed forward towards the thickest of the fighting, drawing strength from the knowledge that his presence, the presence of the flag, could inspire his wavering comrades. A bullet whizzed past his ear, so close he felt the wind of its passage. He didn't flinch, he just kept moving, the flag streaming behind him, a vibrant splash of color amidst the chaos of battle. He saw Private Johnson, a kind-hearted man who had shared his last rations with Tommy just the day before, take a direct hit to the chest. Johnson stumbled, a look of surprise and pain on his face, before collapsing to the ground. Tommy felt a pang of grief, but there was no time to mourn. He had to keep going. Later that day, as the fighting intensified on Little Round Top, Tommy's regiment was ordered to reinforce the beleaguered Union troops there. The march to the hill was agonizing, under constant Confederate artillery fire. The ground was littered with dead and dying soldiers. The screams of horses, mangled by shot and shell, added to the horrific symphony of war. When they finally reached the slopes of Little Round Top, the scene was one of unimaginable ferocity. Union soldiers, low on ammunition, were fighting hand-to-hand with the attacking Confederates. Bayonets clashed, rifle butts swung, and the air was thick with the sounds of grunts, curses, and the metallic clang of steel.
Tommy, following his captain, plunged into the fray. He didn't have a rifle. His weapon was the flag, and he wielded it with a desperate strength. He saw a Confederate soldier, eyes wild with battle fury, charge towards him. Tommy instinctively swung the heavy flagstaff, connecting with the soldier's shoulder. The man cried out and stumbled, giving a Union soldier nearby the opportunity to engage him. Throughout the evening, the battle for Little Round Top raged. Tommy, exhausted and caked in dirt and blood, continued to hold the flag aloft. He felt a fierce pride when he saw his comrades, their faces grim but determined, rally around him. He heard Captain Miller's voice, hoarse from shouting orders, encouraging the men. "Hold the line! For God and country! For the flag!" The next day, July 3rd, brought the climactic Pickett's charge. Tommy, back with his regiment near the center of the Union line, watched in awe and horror as nearly 12,500 Confederate soldiers, stretching for almost a mile, emerged from the woods and began their fateful march across the open fields towards the Union positions. It was a sight of terrible grandeur, a spectacle of human courage and folly. The Union artillery opened fire, tearing massive gaps in the Confederate lines. Tommy could hear the screams of men and the thunder of the cannons. Still they came, a relentless tide of gray-clad soldiers, their resolve unbroken. As they drew closer, the Union infantry unleashed a devastating volley of musketry. The air became a storm of lead. Tommy stood firm, the flag held high, his body trembling not just from fear, but from the sheer force of the concussion. He watched as men around him fell, as the earth became stained with blood. He felt a searing pain in his arm and looked down to see a splinter from a shattered tree trunk embedded in his flesh. He gritted his teeth, ignoring the pain, and refused to lower the flag. In the midst of the chaos, a Confederate officer, mounted on a magnificent black stallion, broke through a gap in the Union lines, charging directly towards Tommy. The officer, sword drawn and glinting in the sunlight, seemed intent on capturing the flag. Fear, primal and overwhelming, surged through Tommy. He was just a boy against a seasoned warrior. But then he remembered Captain Miller's words, "Don't let it touch the ground." With a roar that surprised even himself, Tommy swung the flagstaff with all his might. The heavy wood struck the horse's flank. The stallion reared, neighing in distress, throwing the officer from its back. Before the Confederate could recover, Union soldiers swarmed him, taking him prisoner. The charge ultimately failed, a catastrophic defeat for the Confederacy. The fields were littered with the dead and wounded. The air was thick with the stench of death. As the sun set on that blood-soaked day, Tommy, his arm aching, his body exhausted, still stood, the tattered flag clutched in his hands. He had carried it through fire, through shot and shell, and he had not let it touch the ground.
The next morning, as the Union soldiers began to survey the carnage, Tommy was approached by Captain Miller. The captain's face, usually stern, held a look of profound respect. "Atkins," he said, his voice raspy, "you're a credit to this regiment, a credit to this nation. You held that flag high when others might have faltered. You're a true hero, son." Tommy, usually quiet and reserved, felt a warmth spread through him. He had not sought glory, but in the crucible of battle, he had found something more profound, a sense of purpose, a quiet courage he never knew he possessed, and the unwavering respect of his comrades. He looked at the tattered flag, its colors faded, but its spirit intact. It was more than just a symbol. It was a testament to the sacrifice, the endurance, and the unyielding will of the men who fought beneath it. Gettysburg marked a turning point in the war, but the fighting was far from over. Tommy continued to serve, carrying the flag through many more battles, each one etching deeper lines of experience onto his young face. He witnessed the horrors of war firsthand, the senseless waste of life, the devastating impact on families, and the deep divisions that rent the nation. He fought at Chickamauga, where his regiment was nearly annihilated, and at Chattanooga, where he helped secure a vital victory. He endured the brutal winter campaigns, the scarcity of food, and the constant threat of disease. He saw comrades fall, one after another, their places filled by fresh, eager recruits who, like him, would soon discover the harsh realities of combat. Through it all, the flag remained his constant companion, a silent witness to the triumphs and tragedies of the war. He learned to distinguish the whistle of different shells, the sound of an approaching cavalry charge, and the grim silence that often preceded a major assault. He became adept at finding moments of respite amidst the chaos, a quiet corner to rest, a shared joke with a fellow soldier, a moment of reflection under the vast, indifferent sky. One particularly harsh winter, during the siege of Petersburg, Tommy fell ill with dysentery. He lay shivering in a makeshift hospital tent, his body racked with fever. He overheard the doctors discussing his chances, their voices low and grim. He thought of his farm back in Ohio, the smell of fresh earth, the warmth of his mother's cooking, the gentle lowing of their cows. He wondered if he would ever see it again. But he was a survivor. He had carried the flag through fire, and he would carry his body through this illness. Slowly, painstakingly, he began to recover. When he was finally well enough to rejoin his regiment, the men greeted him with cheers and pats on the back. Captain Miller, his face etched with concern, clapped him on the shoulder. "Thought we'd lost you, son. Glad to have you back."
The war finally ended in April 1865 with Lee's surrender at Appomattox. Tommy, now a hardened veteran of 20, stood among his comrades, witnessing the historic moment. The fighting was over. The nation was whole again, albeit scarred and forever changed. The long march home was a mixture of relief and a strange sense of emptiness. The camaraderie of the army, the shared hardships, the constant danger had forged an unbreakable bond between the men. Now they were returning to their individual lives, to a world that would never fully understand what they had endured. When Tommy finally arrived back at his family farm in Ohio, his parents, older and grayer, rushed out to greet him. His mother embraced him tightly, tears streaming down her face. His father, a stern man, clutched his hand, his eyes filled with a pride that needed no words. Life on the farm felt strangely quiet after the constant roar of battle. The sounds of birdsong and the rustle of leaves were a stark contrast to the screams of men and the thunder of cannons. Tommy found it hard to adjust. He would often wake in the night startled by phantom cannon fire, his heart pounding. The faces of the fallen, the scenes of carnage were burned into his memory. He tried to talk about his experiences, but the words seemed to catch in his throat. How could he explain the horror, the exhilaration, and the profound sense of brotherhood to those who had not been there? He found solace in the quiet rhythm of farm work, in the steady companionship of his family, and in the occasional letters he exchanged with his surviving comrades. Over the years, the scars of war slowly began to fade, but they never truly disappeared. Tommy built a life for himself. He married a kind woman, raised a family, and became a respected member of his community. He never forgot the men he had fought alongside, the sacrifices they had made, or the flag he had carried through fire. He would often sit on his porch in the evenings, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of red and gold, and remember. He remembered the boy he had been, the naive recruit who had dreamed of glory. He remembered the battles, the fear, the courage, and the unwavering spirit of the men who had fought to preserve a nation in the crucible of civil war. And in those quiet moments, he would sometimes imagine the old tattered regimental flag, still waving, still a symbol of defiance, of sacrifice, and of the enduring spirit of a nation forged in the crucible of civil war. His story, like the stories of countless other ordinary men who had done extraordinary things, became a quiet testament to a pivotal moment in American history. A reminder of the profound cost of freedom and the unwavering resilience of the human spirit. It was a story not of grand generals or sweeping strategies, but of a boy who carried the flag, and in doing so, carried the hopes and dreams of a torn nation through the darkest of times.